All right, everybody. Welcome back to the FCA Locker Room, the show where we explore how faith and sports come together to transform lives on and off the field. I'm one of your hosts, Vincenzo Pepe, and today I'm excited to welcome back a familiar guest with us, Cody Massey. Cody joined us last year for a powerful conversation about coaching boys to men and the role a coach plays in discipling young athletes. And Cody, that was actually for a while, it held on there for our number one listened to podcast or episode for quite a while. But you have been passed since then.
We gotta try to beat it today.
Yeah, I think we might be able to do it. But man, a lot has happened in your life since you came on last year. You launched Buzzin Baseball, a training business. We're going to talk about that. Started Rascals Baseball, a club team. Again, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But more than just building players, Cody's out there building young men of faith and weaving discipleship into every aspect of the baseball game while also producing some incredible ball players out there in the Midwest. So we're going to talk a little bit about Cody's new ventures, how he's relied on God through that journey, and how Christian coaches have an incredible opportunity to empower young athletes to be spiritual leaders on and off the field. So Cody, thanks for being with us today, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
So we're gonna start off how we start off most episodes with a question that has absolutely nothing to do with what we're gonna talk about.
Love it.
So what is since you're a baseball guy, what's the funniest or most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to you on the baseball field? Could be as a coach or a player.
On the baseball field. Man, I'd say the funniest one. I don't know if I can share this story because it's actually we was technically cheating. We were cheating, but my senior year, I played on a prospect team, and we were in a fall tournament. And my coach did not like the other coach at all. I think they're like rivals in college or something. So
Yeah.
we matched up to play against those guys. And our coach said before the game, "Hey, if we ever get the opportunity in this game, we're going to run this play." And it is technically cheating, like I said. So, but the play is if we get runners on second and third with less than 2 outs, our batter's going to bunt the ball down the first base line while the second guy on second and guy on third are stealing at the same time on the pitch. And the guy that steals third, instead of going to third base, he's just going to steal and run straight home. It's like he's going to skip third base and run straight home because the home plate umpire is going to be watching the bunt to see if it's fair or foul, and the field umpire is going to be watching first base to see if that guy's safe. So nobody's going to be looking at that side of the field. So sure enough, like fifth inning comes around, and we're winning pretty good, and our coach calls the play, and I'm on second base. So like I just hit a double, and like I'm the guy that's going to have to skip third base. So
You have to be the cheater.
yeah, I was it. So he calls the play, like we all, nod our caps or whatever, and we steal on the pitch. The bunt goes on first base line, perfect. I skip third base by like 40 feet. The guy on third, he slides into home, and I'm like sliding in right on top of him. And the umpire's like,
Yeah.
"We're safe. We're both safe." Like nobody saw it, went off flawlessly, and it ended up causing a benches clearing brawl. But and it was crazy because it was the championship game of this event too.
Yeah.
We didn't get to finish the game. The umpires like called the game and like we had to leave. So
Oh man.
that is probably my craziest baseball story that I can think of, and it was I'll never forget it. I'll remember it for the rest of my life. And it's also funny too because it was a out of town tournament up close to where my wife, girlfriend at the time, but her family's from. And it was my first day meeting her grandpa. He came to the game, and he was fired up though. He loved it. He thought it was incredible. So
That's funny. That's such a Cody story there.
yep, there
Oh,
you go.
love that. All right, so let's talk business now then. So like we said, there's a lot has been going on in your life the last year or so since we had you on. Tell us a little bit about what's going on. I know you got Buzzin Baseball, Rascals, if you want to talk a little bit about that, if there's other things going on with you.
Yeah. So I think last we talked, I just launched Buzzin Baseball. So just a player development facility here where athletes come in and we train them from ages 8 to 18. And actually beyond that, we have a lot of college guys as well. And so not really team oriented or anything, just more so individual training. And through Buzzin, we actually have our own Bible studies as well. So we have on Saturdays, we actually are about to start those back up because school's back in session, but we'll have athletes from all different schools meet at our facility. We'll get them food, and we'll have Bible study and play wiffle ball and all kinds of awesome stuff. But so we did that this past year, and we felt called to start our own club. So now we
Mhm.
have teams under a different brand, a different umbrella, but that's called Rascals Baseball. So we have 12 teams, ages 8 all the way to 18. And so between Buzzin and Rascals, and then I'm also a head high school and middle school coach at Maryville Christian School. We've been pretty busy with ball, so it's been a lot of fun.
And I mean, I had, I was lucky to be in a lot of talking to you through a lot of these things, right? Like as you were trying to figure out what you were going to do in transition, where is it going to be baseball? Was it not going to be baseball? For a while, you weren't going to do any coaching anymore. You're just going to do the training. Now you're back into coaching again. Like, how did you see? Like, what did your decision making look like? Like, how did you bring that to God? And I guess in this transition, how did you see God kind of show up in the direction that you guys started going in?
Yeah, I think even since the birth of Buzzin baseball, it's been super organic and birthed by God. Because like you said, like originally, I'm like, man, I don't even know if I want to get back into baseball. Like I was kind of burnt on it with
Hmm.
some relationships and man, like every day I just felt the need and call amongst the athletes that wanted to train with me. And so through a lot of prayer and just talking with people, it's like, hey, I think we're gonna go for it. We're gonna run player development and do lessons and all that stuff again. And in doing that, like I said selfishly, like, man, I'm never going to touch teams again. Like, I never want to mess with teams. And here we are. And it's like through all that stuff, like all of my selfish thoughts and desires through it all, like have just been punched in the face by God. Um, and to where it's like all this stuff has been orchestrated by him and it's not forced, it's not rushed. We're building it slow, we're building it on his time, and it's turned into something that's way bigger than I would have ever expected 365 days ago. And
Yeah.
so it's been a lot of fun, man. A lot of great people involved. And so when you have all those good people involved that are praying alongside you, and my wife and family and all those people, it's like it hasn't been hard. It's been hard. It's been a lot of work, but it hasn't felt like it's been on my own because it's
Hmm.
God orchestrated. So
Yeah. That's great. And you mentioned that you guys were doing a Bible study for athletes through Buzzin. What led you to do that, and what's it kind of been like just interacting with those kids on a Saturday?
yeah, I think, man, the relationships and conversations we have in the cage are great. When we're training, we're trying to get better at baseball. I have just a set apart time where we're going to come together and open God's word and just invite whoever and whatever. And so that's kind of between myself and Connor Rogotsky, which he's a New York kid, but he's out here. We just felt called to, man, let's open and see what happens. And I think our biggest day we've had, man, maybe 25, 30 kids at that. And we walk through the word together and pray, and it's a time for them to ask questions about faith. Some of them are super deep in faith, so they're leading alongside us too. And there's some that are like they've never stepped foot in the church, and so we felt this just a call to that because it's an easy entry for an athlete. Similar to FCA, it's like, hey, you're going to show up with other athletes and other like-minded kids, not necessarily walking into a Sunday school class.
Yeah.
And it makes it a little bit easier point of entry, especially when you have free food involved. Yeah, we felt called to do that. And again, we're kind of feeling called to get back into that. We took some time off in the summer because on the weekends, a lot of these guys are traveling with their teams. And so our numbers were honestly zero because everybody was
Yeah.
gone. But now that school's back in session, people are getting their feet back wet with school. We're about to ramp it back up.
Nice. I mean, ever since I've pretty much known you when I lived out there, you've always lived with your faith on your sleeve, right? Like that's not something that you've ever shied away from. Even the way like we kind of became friends. Like the first time you met me, you were like, "Hey, we're starting a Bible study. You want to come?" And like that was like within like 20 minutes of meeting you, and so which I appreciate because I don't know what would have happened if you didn't invite me all those years ago to that. Who knows where I'd be now? But um, we talk a lot about how coaches can be some of the most influential people in an athlete's life, and obviously not even just an athlete, but a coach also, right? I was a coach when you and I met, and you were influential in my life in that way. But how do you start? How do you see that playing out with your players? Like, you living with your faith on your sleeve. I know you have some other coaches involved with Buzzin and Rascals that are also Christian, where you guys are, praying with your athletes. You guys are talking about faith in the cages and things like that. How do you see that, or do you see it kind of rubbing off on these athletes and having conversations? They're starting to bring things to you. Like, where's that all play?
Yeah, I think I feel like my role in all of it is just planting seeds. Like one, it can be as simple as inviting them to something like this, but also just like hitting them up when stuff's tough. Like I'm in their life and I hear a lot of, the ups and downs of their life, not just baseball. Like, I'm just a baseball guy and younger. And so a lot of these kids can relate. And so they'll bring things to me that aren't baseball. Hey, my mom got diagnosed with cancer or whatever, just different things. And through that, like I can reach out to them in a way that a lot of other people can't, like teachers can't and so on. Where, maybe I'll follow up with that kid a couple weeks down the road and be like, hey, I've been praying. What are some things that have been going on? And so with that, there's just seeds being planted where it's, genuine, authentic relationships. And that's kind of what I build my business on too is, and so sometimes, I see the fruit of that quick. I've had kids, accept Christ in my office before. But it's always not as pretty as that. I might not hear from a kid for years, and then he'll text me out of the blue and be like, "Hey, man, like, where do you go to church? I've been looking for a church." And so, by just having my faith on display, I feel like they kind of know that they know where I stand on things. And so when things come up, like Charlie Kirk or things like that, and kids ask questions, I'm eager for those guys. And so it's a lot of just authentic relationships and conversations, and that's why I think last time we talked too, I'm big on social media, man. I put a lot of my life on social media,
Mhm.
not for the likes or people to share or whatever. It's more so just like I want kids to see what it's like to walk a godly life and be a good husband and dad and all that stuff, to where when they're feeling things or they they're looking to see what's right and wrong and so on, they feel like they can come to me just with genuineness. So
Yeah, and you said something in the beginning of that. I think the coaches listening to this really should need to take away. It's the relationship building with them, right? It's the little pieces, right? As you're in the cage, you're talking about life, you're doing things, right? And you've been very open about your life, but it's that relationship, because if you're a coach that's not intentional about getting to know your athlete outside of them being an athlete, like you need to know them not just as athlete, but hey, this is Cody, right? Like you need to know them as a person. And I feel like and some of it's the pressure on our coaches and the society that we live in. It's just like, man, I just got to produce. I got to produce. I got to get this many lessons in. I got to get this kid through an hour, whatever it might be. But I think as coaches, like it's being intentional with the time that you have, right? I mean, how often do coaches spend a half hour the night before putting together a practice plan? But in that practice plan, are you putting in some extra time where you can have real life conversations? Are you building in that time? And obviously, with you, you've been doing it for a while, so it kind of comes natural to be able to have some conversations and things like that. But um, do you see that with coaches that you work with, where um, have you ever had to like mention to them like, hey, like let's be more intentional about the relationship piece and not just the athletic, not just the X's and the O's, like not just how do you hit this curveball, right? But like how do you do life?
yeah, I think a lot of that is like building a coaching staff is step one, because like if you have delegated roles, it frees you up more time, to because like as a coach, it's like, man, we have a lot of stuff to get done today. Like I want to get XYZ covered at practice, or we struggled with this last night. It's like I'm running hard to get those things cleaned up. And sometimes like if I'm the only guy there, it's like I don't free myself up enough during that practice to be able to have intentional times. Some like the best moments that I have are like when I'm at school or something coaching my team, and my guys are with our other coaches doing different things. Like, hey, half our team's throwing bullpens with the pitching coach, the other half's doing on-field BP, and it frees me up to be able to walk around a little bit. Like when guys are shagging in the outfield, I can walk around and have conversations that's way deeper than baseball. So I think like one of the biggest tickets you can have is as a coach is just making sure you're delegating your staff really well, because it can free you up to really build authentic relationships, and then also giving your staff the freedom to do that as well. When you're busy coaching and so on, like they can be an ear or a tongue to those guys when they need it. And so building in systems, like you said, like building in specific time to be intentional is huge. Um, And if you're not intentional when you're practice planning or when you're thinking about it ahead of time, you're probably not going to get to it. Because again,
Yeah.
there's way too much stuff to do in a 2 hour window or in a 1 hour lesson slot or a 30-minute lesson slot or so on. And that's why for me it's been awesome like having my own business, because during the day I'm usually just doing business planning and things like that, and that's a time where I can maybe text some guys and check in on them. They might be at school, they might not hit me back right away or so on, but at least I got something over to them like, hey, I've been thinking about you, or hey, fill me in on what you talked about last night, to where I can check up on guys and have relationships that way too.
Well, my next question for you was going to be how do you balance the competitiveness and like developing that skill with discipleship? But you kind of mentioned, right, like building a good team around you with those things. But the other piece of that question is, so you've been involved with a lot of teams in the past that have had a lot of success, right? And now Rascals is just kind of starting out, but just from I'm sure of it, like some of the players that you have in there, you guys are going to be really good at some point, right? And as you guys are developing, and even your school team and stuff, how would you how would you explain or describe to a Christian coach, right, that just because we're Christians doesn't mean that we can't go out and like dominate the field, right? Like we can walk around that field, right, and not just be like softies, right? And so many times people are like, oh, well, those are the Christian guys, blah blah blah, right? Like, and you get pushed around or whatever. Like, how do you balance that piece of things?
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And that's man, that's a big piece of how I operate.
Like I
Um,
know I know
I'm
baseball isn't a
super
physical
competitive,
sport,
man.
right?
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
not tackling people, but there's a piece to it that is like gritty.
yeah. There's still a piece to get after it, like even just with how you practice, right, and things like that. And so, Jesus was lion and lamb, 100% of both. He wasn't 50 and 50. He was 100% of both. And so he's the same Jesus that healed the blind and the sick and loved on people. The same Jesus that made a cord whip and flip tables, right? And so I think a lot of times like people view Christians as soft, um, and it's like in reality we should be pursuing excellence even more than non-Christians, and running a race that's of power and sound mind, not a spirit of fear. Those things like more so than the outsiders, and so that stuff fires me up, and I think that it can you can build some pretty sweet motivational speeches on scripture and so on. But um, yeah, to answer your question, it's like how do you get those guys in a spot to where we're going to work hard and do those things. Like my high school team, our motto is out of Proverbs, but it's like with all labor comes profit. Mere talk leads only to poverty. And so like we can talk about being good, we can talk about having a great program, we can talk about getting guys off to the next level, but like there's a lot of work that goes into that. Just talking about it doesn't do anything. Like there's a lot of work that's involved. And so getting our guys to be hardworking individuals and being on display of we're not here to just rah rah ree and pat some knees. Like we're
Yeah.
gonna go out there and beat some people. So
I love that. I think you're right though. Like we as Christians, like we should hold excellence to a high standard, right? More so than the world. All right, so let's talk about empowering young athletes to be spiritual leaders. So, in your position, you're not just influencing kids, you're equipping them, right? You're equipping them to influence others. Um, so, how have you seen that multiplication happen, or have you, right, in with the athletes that you've dealt with? And also, I just want to like remind listeners that Cody is not doing these things by himself, right? Hopefully, ideally, in a perfect world, they're plugged in at a church or a youth group or something like that. They have somebody else, maybe they're involved in another FCA group, right? But oftentimes, especially here in the Northeast, that's not always the case. They're not always going to church on Sundays and things like that. So maybe the half-hour lesson they get in one week is the only faith piece that they get, right? But in your situation, you might have a combination of those things. But so just putting that out there that you don't have to put so much pressure on yourself that you're the only person, doing these things, or there's not going to be other people, and that you need to, save their life right then and there in the cage every single time. But because you had mentioned earlier that sometimes athletes will reach out to you years later and be like, "Hey, man, like I just want to thank you, like because you were planting those seeds early on, right? But you were just consistent with it." But anyway, how have how do you see that multiplication happening with you influencing your athletes and then perhaps them influencing their teammates?
yeah, I think for me, it's so like the planting seeds thing is one part of the job, and then the other part is pointing them towards resources to where they can grow, right? Like it is very unrealistic for me to do those things you were saying with the amount of athletes I'm around. So like around me, I use those resources. Like we have a very, very strong FCA here. So I'll point guys to their FCA huddles. I'll point guys to church events, to youth groups, to other, even just other like mentors in the area that do things. And I think for me, like that's probably the biggest ticket, because like the capacity that I have to disciple all these guys is very, very small.
Sure.
There's a select few that I do, but like for the most part, I'm just pointing them to the resources that already exist. And so like to multiply, like for instance, there'll be kids that come into maybe my Bible study or so on, and I'll push them off to their FCA huddle. And then like I'll look and that kid's at like the huddle leadership camp and he's a counselor there. And then that same kid is building a friend and they're both leading their own huddle when they go off to college. And so like that multiplication happens. And sometimes I don't see the fruit of that because again, I'm just trying to plant seeds and point them towards the resources. But there's even one kid that comes to mind that I coached when I've coached him since he was maybe like 11. And he started his own business called the Lone Lamb Project. I think I talked about it last time I was on your show.
Yeah.
But he sells hats and uses those funds for prison ministry. And it's like, that's super cool, man. It's like we spent, hotel nights on the road when he was in 14, 15U baseball, walking through the word. And then like to see what he's doing is like, that's really cool to know that, I might've planted a seed in that. So, yeah, I think that as a coach, like don't feel the pressure to do those things and really learn the resources around you. Get involved and know the local youth pastors, know the local FCA people, and like people like you and those that are involved in FCA as directors and so on. Like they're gonna build relationships with schools, and they'll know people within schools that are discipling kids that maybe we could point them to, and so on. So use the resources around you and get to know those. If that's the number one way to grow a mission pretty fast. So
Yeah. And to your point, you said, you have a handful of kids that, you're probably hands-on discipling, right? Like you're taking them under your wing type of thing. I mean, even Jesus had 12, right? Like he didn't have 500. And so I think that's, there's something biblical to that. But I do like that how, you're not passing them off in a bad way, right? But you're passing them on to somebody that's going to have the capacity or better ability to serve them than maybe you would in that point. But again, you're still not just giving up on them, right? They're still coming to you for lessons. You're still talking about things. You're still pouring into them, just maybe not at the capacity that you are with other people, which is great. So, you know, uh, do you think athletes, let's say high school athletes specifically, do you think they realize the influence that they have with their teammates and in their schools and things like that? Do you think they really truly understand what it means to like that they play a sport and because of that, not everyone's going to look up to them, right? But a lot of times, like sports rule like our schools, right? So, do you think that they realize that they have a platform, or is that something that you think coaches really have to help them realize and how they can harness that into kingdom impact?
yeah, I'd say there's a select few good ones that do realize it and they do a great job. But for the most part, no. And I mean, even down into let's just talk non-Christian athletes, just your normal high school athlete. Like I always have to get on those guys early when I get them. Like maybe they're new to the organization or they're new to the team or whatever. Like, hey, like one of the things we don't do is we don't use foul language whatsoever, because like especially my club, we'll have a 17U team in their training, but there might be a 9U team right next to them training. And it's like, man, these kids, like these 9-year-olds, they look at you like you're major leaguers. Like they
Mhm.
think you're big leaguers, dude. And so how you act, how you go about your business, how you go about your work, how you go about speaking, how you go about being a good teammate, all that stuff is looked at by these little dudes right next to you. And it carries a lot of weight. And so I'm always big on making sure like that our older guys know that. And so to your question, like, yes, it is on us as coaches to get them to understand that, because the impact and influence that those kids have sometimes is greater than what a coach has or what you and I have, and because they walk the halls a little different as an athlete. And, like a band kid might think that kid's a superstar, even though that band kid is probably just as cool a kid, if not cooler, with whatever how he does band and things. And like So athletes carry a lot of influence in a school, in environments, um, way more so than they know. And I think that getting them to understand that impact is huge. And that's something that we do, like I said, almost on day one. I make sure that they understand that.
Yeah. Just giving them practical advice and tools. So like, hey, this is how you can use your influence, right? By
Yeah.
saying certain things or not saying certain things.
Yeah.
That's good. Um, so if a coach is listening to this, right, what advice would you give to another Christian coach who maybe they're just not sure how to bring faith into their team culture? What kind of advice would you give to them?
Hmm. I would take them, like I said, to resources. Like you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You don't need to, stay up all night preparing a sermon. You don't need to do all those things. Like if you're in the Word individually and you're praying individually and you're being Spirit led in your life and you're living a life that way, just go hunt down the resources that already exist. Like even as simple as FCA resources dot I think it's .org or something like that.
Hmm.
Like they have all kinds of stuff on there to just simplify even just the smallest huddle or whatever it is. And then once you get some of those resources and you execute some of those, you can start putting your own flair on it yourself, and once you get and honestly, like the number one way I think you can do it if you're wanting to start one on your own is just go listen to some or go, go be involved in some on your own to where you're the one receiving the info, right? I think a lot of the stuff that comes out of my mouth is, and this is just everybody in the world, like stuff that comes out of my mouth is stuff that I've already heard in a pulpit or read in a book or in a podcast and those things. Like what you're listening to is what's going to come out. And so even just as simple as, you're listening to this podcast right now and you took the time to do that to develop yourself. Um, these words that I say that you say or so on, they're going to go out and resonate with other people just because they've heard it, And so the content that you consume is the content that you're going to put on display, and so you don't need to reinvent the wheel on that. And so, yeah, ultimately, if you're going to start one on your own, don't reinvent the wheel, man. Just use all the stuff and the tools and all the things that God already gave you.
I think I appreciate how you said like go listen, right? Go learn a little bit. Um, because if you're trying, or well, let's take this for example, baseball, right? Every year there's a huge conference called the ABCA, right? Like almost every baseball coach that exists goes to that thing, right? And they're going there to become a better coach, right? You're getting all these resources and you're seeing the new equipment and the technology, and you're hoping to take something away, right? And bring that back to your team to become better, right? And to become a better coach. So you're doing the research, you're putting in the time to do those things to be a better coach. But if you're a coach listening right now and you want to learn or just be better at bringing faith into your team culture, same thing applies. You need to be intentional about those things. And plus, side note, if you do go to ABCA, there is an FCA coaches breakfast, so you can go to that something like that and get fed that way too. But I think that's it's a good point, right? I think we as coaches tend to think, well, I need to do everything I can, or I'm going to bring all this stuff to the athletes. And we always tell them, hey, you need to go learn more on your own. You need to get more training. You need to go do this, right? Because we know that we can't do everything all at once with them. So we're trying to give them the pieces to put it together. But I think the same thing, goes for the coaches. Like we need to be the ones learning also, right? We need to be the ones upping our game. We need to be the ones that if we want to make this thing happen, right? If we want to be a faithful coach, a faithful leader, then how are we going to do that? And if you're struggling with that, like you said, listen to podcasts, listen to people that are in that realm. Go on some websites, see different things that you have, listen to whatever, read a book. That's a really good point. All right, so what's one thing, one takeaway, and this could be for an athlete that's listening, it might be a parent. Obviously, we've talked a lot specifically to coaches here, but what's one big takeaway that you would want, athletes or their parents to take away from this and your story, and how you're trying to develop athletes, right? What you see on the field and in the cage and things like that. What's one takeaway from your story that you want a parent or that athlete to really walk away from this in the realm of being empowered as a Christian athlete, as a Christian youth athlete?
Get involved in a local Bible believing church.
Mhm.
Like that's it. Because like go hear the word, go serve at that church, go be served by that church, get involved in your local church. And I think the stronger you're going to do that, everything else falls into place. As athletes, we have tournaments on the weekend and some of those things, and we have to miss some stuff. But like, make that a priority to figure out how to be involved in a local church. Going to FCA is great. Going to these Bible studies is great. But if you're not actively serving alongside the body of believers that are in the local church, then you're not going to be growing in a way that's as fast filled with fruit as that. So that's my number one takeaway. As parents, as families, as all those people, like, get around believers, grow alongside them, serve alongside them, dive into God's word alongside them, all that stuff. And all these things that we're doing is supplementary to that. And that's the number one thing.
And I think it's important if you're a parent listening to this and maybe you're struggling because you're like, all right, well, we want to go to church, but our kid plays on the weekends, like you said, right? During summer, fall, whatever it might be. And that's a decision that, parents have to make. Do they want their kids to be involved in a sport that takes them away from church on a Sunday during a season, or not, or whatever the case is? And, I see arguments for both sides of it. But just because they're in the summer, you're gone, 5 or 6 weeks out of the summer, doesn't mean you can't be going on those other Sundays. But like you said, there's other things to get involved with, right? If you are at a church, right? If you are plugged into a church, but maybe there's a season where you're not going to church consistently over the summer, like, get involved with those other things. There's other opportunities and resources for you to stay involved with the body during that time. But then,
And
yeah,
like you said, that, like what you said there about, like, it's a season, man. Like,
yeah.
a lot of these parents and families, they're gone for maybe 5 weeks, like you said, and then they use that as an excuse the other 45 weeks of the year. It's like, dude, like, as long as if you're growing faithfully alongside those people the other 45 weeks, and then those 5 weeks, like, they know that, like, you're kind of in the thick of some stuff, they're going to be alongside you too, man. They're going to be serving you through the week. They're going to be praying for you. They're going to be pointing you towards those supplementary things like FCA and podcasts and all these things. You can watch church online in the car with your family on the way to the game, like all these things. So, number one, man, paramount, get involved with the local church.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Cody. So as we wrap up here, how can people follow along with Buzzin and Rascals if they want to check it out? Maybe there's someone listening that's local to you, or they just kind of want to see what your whole program is about. How can they get connected with you?
Yeah, I'd say the number one way we get our stuff out there is probably Instagram, at Buzzin Baseball on Instagram, at Rascal Baseball on Instagram, at CMass6 is my Instagram. I would say that's like the number one way. That also filters out into our Facebook pages and so on. We have websites, all that, but as far as just the day to day, seeing what athletes are doing and growing, how to seeing when invitations go live for Bible studies, all those things, that usually gets blasted out on Instagram. So that's best way to find us.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Cody, for hopping on today. Hopefully, I mean, I know I learned some stuff out of here. I wrote down some good notes. Hopefully, the coaches and parents and athletes listening to it were able to take some stuff away. And we always appreciate you having you on. And we're gonna hopefully see if this one breaks a new record and gets the most downloads in the first week.
I'm gonna have to share the heck out of it.
Yeah. Well, it'll be on Buzzin Baseball, at Rascals Baseball, and at CMass6.
Boy, I love it.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us on the FCA Locker Room. And until next time, keep competing for Christ on and off the field. And we'll see you guys.